the stars above. Without it, life is wasted time. Look inside your heart, oh, look inside of mine. Things look so bad everywhere. In this whole world, what's fair? We walk blind and we try to see, falling behind in what could be. Bring me a higher love.
Now, those of you who've been waiting for Steve Winwood because you're over 48, that was him. He's coming in a few weeks. Just want to sit in this reality, like even the prayer for and the heaviness of thinking about global news and the conflict happening in Ukraine right now, to our own lives, which don't cease to move and happen and have their own challenges and their own hopes and dreams. This invitation to a higher love. That's what this whole conversation and lessons from the book of Philippians is. It's a look at, is there a best for you and me? Is there a best? Or is it just a matter of each of us kind of picking our path through, kind of a choose your own adventure, and maybe it works out well, maybe it doesn't. So we're going to be in Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 26. We're doing our whole journey through this one little letter. And just to back up a little bit and remind you, this was a letter. It wasn't received like this. They didn't have the printing press. It was probably a rolled up scroll, and it would have been handed off in this community of people. This community of people that if you knew them, you would have loved them because they're just like you. They're people and they have jobs and families and hopes and dreams and struggles and aches and illnesses. And they had come together and they formed this thing called the church, the ecclesia, the gathering of God's people in Philippi. And if you were here week one, there were a few interesting folks in that church. Lydia, she was a business owner and didn't have a lot of power, but she's pretty influential. And then sitting next to her was a jailer. We don't know his name, but the guy worked for the authorities and exacted punishments, and they started this little church, and it grew, and people heard the message, the same message we want for each of you, that you would discover that Jesus Christ is irresistible in every aspect of your lives. He is ready and present and has what you need. They discovered this. And they started to live this out. And Paul wrote them a letter. And so if you have this with you, you can read along with me. I'm just trying to be a little historical here. We're going to read it the same way they did. So they would have got the letter. There certainly was not this, where they would and then the person would turn around and say, then Paul said. It was just a scroll. They opened it up and they read it straight through. So if you're a guest with us today, or you're unfamiliar with this story from the scriptures, and you're like, what is this? But hang in there, because this is how they would have started. They would have just read it. And then we're going to jump in and I don't know why, but this series has been so philosophically heavy for me so far. And I think it will stay there because Paul is asking really big questions in the things that he's saying, and he's offering incredible answers. So here's our little story time for you right now. Here's our reading. Just imagine you're there. You're in the church of Philippi. It's Lydia and the jailer and everyone else who became part of this. And keep in mind, what's incredible about this is from the very first days, the church has always been marked by people who are at each other's throats until they met Jesus and they became family. And they had a common cause and they had a common community, and it didn't matter what divided them before. And that's the people. And this is the letter to them. Paul goes on to say, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, my purposes, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by his imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Now some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, and others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but they're actually doing it because they want to inflict punishment on me in my imprisonment. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed. And in that I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with the full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live as Christ and to die as gain. If I'm to live in the flesh, simply means if I'm to go on living, if I'm to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I'm hard-pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain here is more necessary on your account. So convinced of this, I know I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and joy in the faith, so that in me you may have ample cause to glorify Jesus because of my coming to you. That's how it would have gone. They would have opened up the letter and they would have read probably start to finish. We're just taking verses 12 through 26, and my hope is to unpack it for you. Before we jump in there, I want to highlight something. So this book of Philippians is pretty intense. Think of his friends reading that. Whether in my life or in my death, this is someone they love, and they're thinking about his real situation. In the midst of all these high kind of some philosophical questions we're gonna ask today, and I think Paul gives great answers to, there's also just like the good stuff of the church. They're friends, they eat together, they take care of each other. So a highlight during the whole series is in your message notes. It's 5 ways you can jump in and get involved. And you might be like, I don't know where, but these are like really great ways that help the church be healthy and thrive. Things like the prayer team. Mary talked about it. We've got about 30 people on the prayer team. If you pray, I'd love for you to be on the prayer team. That means when people submit a prayer request that's not confidential, you get to join them in praying with them. Then there's the Just Ask team. This is a group that if you have a need or someone you know has a need, their fence broke down or they need a Thanksgiving dinner or they just need some help, you reach out to the Just Ask team, and they send people like you and me just out to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And then there's a facilities team, because sometimes the building needs the hands and feet of Jesus too. So if you're good with a hammer and things like that, or a screwdriver, you can tell how inept I am at that. If you're good with a hammer, join that. If you know you can do facilities things, you should be jumping on there. Fun and festivities. If you like to party, you make good guacamole. You can serve a nice scoop of food to someone coming down a line. You know how to wipe down a table. We have a few big parties here throughout the year. Fun and festivities. And then the bacon and egg team, by far our volunteers' favorite team. Sunday morning, the bacon and egg team delivers breakfast over there because people get here early and they make sure they have a breakfast on Sunday. I highlight this because what we're about to talk about is intense, but the people who were thinking and talking about it just live together. They were in community. They enjoyed life together. So we're going to jump in with that in mind and really explore this idea of higher love. To do that, though, I have to kind of I have to let Steve Jobs give you and I a bit of framework. Now, real quick, if you think about, I'm not sure what kind of phone you have in your pocket. Most of you should have an Apple, and those of us with Apple and are on group texts wish you all did, because you mess with us so much. If that green bubble thing, you're like, come on, everyone just get on the same device. But let's go back in history just a little bit.
An iPod.
2007.
A phone. And an internet communicator.
What?
An iPod. A phone.
And an internet communicating device.
Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices.
Blow my mind.
This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicating device. And did you see that room full of nerds going nuts? They were like, some of you are those nerds. Yeah, I'm using that term affectionately, but I laugh so much about younger generations were like, yeah, this is my phone. It's like my independence. I'm like, do you see the nerdy group that built it? A bunch of people like, woo, an iPod, a phone, a camera, an internet connection device. They're so excited. But you know what he didn't say? This is what they weren't clapping for. He didn't go, and check this out. Got a door you need left open? Best store stop you'll get your hands on. Whoa! No one did that. Or making dinner for guests, forget your butter knife. Best butter spreader you could ever use. Or this one, job interview, quick comb. He didn't say those things. No one was excited about those things because of this. And this is our underlying premise. I almost wish I didn't have to introduce this with the phone because technology is driving me nuts right now. But the underlying premise is this: the greatest potential is reached and the highest satisfaction is gained when a thing is used for its created intent. Go ahead. Who called? No, okay. The greatest potential is reached and the highest satisfaction is gained when a thing is used for its created intent. And that's what we see unfolding in that moment. He's like, friends, you're going to be able to carry in your pocket an iPod. It was this old thing that just carried music. A phone. You used to have to be tethered to a wall to use that thing. And an internet communication device, a computer, all to get, and this device, you're gonna love it the most, and it's gonna have its greatest potential and bring you the highest satisfaction when you use it for its created intent. Now, maybe being a little facetious about spreading butter or combing your hair, but let's take an example. He did not say you're gonna have a gateway to the destruction of pornography in your pocket, and the room erupted in applause, because that's not its intended purpose. That's not its created intent. That misuse creates something different than highest satisfaction. You're going to be able to text other people and comment on other people's things and tear them down and divide and be divisive, and your family text thread is going to be a political mess. None of that's a selling point. No one would have been cheering in the room. It was supposed to be a way you could listen to music, stay connected with people, and surf the web when you needed to. The greatest potential is reached and the highest satisfaction is gained when a thing is used for its created intent. So 3 core ideas. Created intent is going to be part of what Paul speaks to us about today. Maximized potential. You're going to find a man writing to some friends saying, I am like peak potential. I've maximized it. And you're going to see that there's no doubt in his words, in that letter I started reading to you, that he's full of satisfaction. And I think what's underlying this is true for all things. If you're an athlete, it's true for the equipment you use for that sport. You have to use it the right way to get the greatest satisfaction, the highest potential out of it. There's a way you swing a bat. There's a way you shoot a ball. Let's think about that. It's true for all things. It's true for your life and my life. In some ways, aren't we all trying to figure out why we're here and what it means to be human and how this plays out in our relationships, and as we age and we're confronted with our mortality and what we do with these things, or as we move on to new thresholds, graduation, starting a family, getting married, ending a family, so many different things that could be happening, transitions and circumstances. And in the midst of this, I think freedom is kind of what's underlying this. So I just want to give you some thoughts. Freedom is not the absence of limitation. It's not the ability to just be unhindered and unfettered and live and move and breathe as you or I want, because that would mean your freedom could end up being my bondage. If I'm free to be a human trafficker, then it's no longer freedom for anybody, because I'm taking away someone else's freedom. Freedom is instead the ability to fulfill our created intent. Kind of a lame connection, but the iPhone is most free when you're using it to connect with people, do good searches on the web, and listen to great music. Whatever's great music to you. Freedom is the ability to fulfill our created intent. And I'm going to say some things over the next few minutes that I hope are a little toe-stepping, because Paul's speaking from a situation that's going to be a blessing, a gift to all of us. Guy's in the middle of some tough things, and he seems to have a way through, because there's this question: what am I made to do? This is like underlying question, right? What am I made to do? And then let me do that. So not everyone believes, and not everyone here believes that it's all like created potential, created intention, maximized potential, highest satisfaction. So I want to give you a question. Now, first I want to say we're going to look at, in 1988, we're not talking about Elvis's daughters, but Life magazine, I'm not sure if it's in print anymore, so this is probably worth some money. Why are we here was a question they asked. And they asked it to a ton of people. But before we hear their answers, and then we see how Paul answers that, I'd love for you to turn to the person next to you. And here's your question. We always do a few on a Sunday morning. If you're sitting alone and you're comfortable, like getting a little closer and saying hi to somebody, turn and say hello to someone, quick introduction, and go, okay, why am I here? I know it's kind of a big question. You can answer it as a joke, or you can dive right in. You only get like 45 seconds. So why are we here? Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk explicitly about this question. All right, well done. Well done, everybody. We just hopefully answered a question that's been for age upon age upon age the human mind has wrestled with. Why are we here? And we're really good at occupying ourselves with vocation and career and family and possession and growing and gardening and fishing and whatever else. We're good at occupying ourselves with answers to this question. I want to pull back that a little bit, and we're going to start back with that Time Life article. It's a pretty interesting one. There were many people who spoke to. I want to highlight a few because there were only two buckets that emerged. It wasn't like there was 100 different answers. There were just two different answers said a lot of different ways. So you have like Nobel laureate Maya Angelou saying things like, "I believe that the force that created life is betting that human beings will do something quite wonderful, like live up to their potential. I am influenced largely by Blaise Pascal and his wager. Pascal advises us to bet on the toss of a coin that God is. If we win eternity. If we lose nothing." That's Pascal's wager, a way he was considering the existence of God. She goes on to say, quite poetic, "I'm looking out a large window now, and I see about 40 dogwood, maple, oak, and locust trees. And the light is on some of the leaves, and it's so beautiful. Sometimes I'm overcome with gratitude at such sights and feel that each of us has responsibility for being alive. One, responsibility to creation, of which we are a part. Two, responsibility to the Creator, a debt we repay over and over." Now, contrast her with taxi driver and funny guy, Jose Martinez. "We're here to die. Just live and die. I drive a cab, I do some fishing, take my girl out, pay taxes, good guy, do a little reading, and then I get ready to drop dead." Okay, so I don't know what Jose's after, but he is articulating a bucket or a way of thinking different than Maya. He's saying, yeah, why are we here? We're not really. You just got a few breaths to take. As long as you get them, enjoy them, then it's over. You have a humorous like Garrison Keillor. This was in '88, so everyone's a bit aged in this conversation. But to know and serve God, of course. This is why we're here. That's what Garrison said. Very similar to Chicago Bears coach Mike Ditka. The Bears, you remember that? Okay, "I believe we're here for a reason. I believe that I'm created by God to do the job that he's given me while I'm here, to serve him and then return to him. But it took me a long time to understand this." That's Ditka. And then contrast him to paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould. Stephen Jay says this: "We must construct these answers, the answer to the question, ourselves from our own wisdom and ethical sense. There is no other way." What's he talking about? Well, here's how he started. Keep in mind, there's nobody in this conversation, no one answering this question who's an idiot. They're thoughtful. They're trying to answer this question. They're considering how the world works, how their lives work. And here, Stephen Jay Gould is wrapping his head around this. And he says, "We're here because one odd group of fishes had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures. And because the earth never froze entirely during an ice age." And then he goes on to say, because we've seen all this advancement, we're always asking the bigger question, why are we here? And he says, it's a waste of time. He says, we must construct these answers within ourselves from our own wisdom and ethical sense. There is no other way. And so the two buckets, if you read the whole article, or if we were to poll this room and we were to be really honest, I think we'd probably generally fall on a few categories. Obviously, there's going to be a spectrum on these categories. We'd probably generally fall in these two buckets. The first is we'd say, I'm here to know God and love God. There's a creator. He has an intent for my life, and I am meant to fulfill it. And we chase wild dreams and do crazy things, and we pick ourselves up over and over again because of this belief. And then there's not really a higher purpose beyond my biology and my chemistry governed by the laws of physics, things I can understand and things I can measure and things I can grab hold of. I'm no more than a random collocation of atoms. There's no reason why I'm here, so I must create one. Both people trying to answer the question, why am I here? So we're going to put both of these to the test. Like, take them to like the mean streets of Southeast Boise. We're going to put them in your life and my life, and we're going to ask 3 questions, and then look how Paul addresses these in verses 12 through 26. Questions about circumstances, questions about like success and competition, and then the last one is a question about morality, which affects those other two, circumstances and success and competition. But before we jump in, if you weren't here last week or you were, I want to give you 3 words. I'd hope you'd write them down somewhere. Put them on the phone, write them on your hand, your arm, whatever. Write them on the arm of the person next to you. If you don't know them, ask them first. But the words are this: whenever we open the scripture, so here's a single copy of Philippians. That's what we're in for the next 8 weeks. And when we open this up, you go, okay, I want to be curious. What's my curiosity? Do I have any curiosity about what I'm doing, or have I already pre-decided what it is or isn't? I think that's a mistake in anything, to predetermine. Be curious. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to read verses 12 through 26. I'm going to be a crazy curious person, just all curious. And then don't just stay curious. Start to have conversations. Come up with some questions. Curiosity, conversations. Start discussing. What do I see? What's God saying? Do I believe that God is speaking through this? What does this mean? You get into that in conversations. And then you end up with conclusions. Okay, so a letter penned almost 2,000 years ago, preserved through historical time, given to me. I'm reading it today in my church in Southeast Boise. We're talking about it. So what? What does it mean for my life, for my neighbors, for my city, for how I answer these questions, like why am I here? And if you've been around the church a long time, this is called inductive Bible study method. It's just curiosity, conversations, conclusions. Start with an open mind, come up with some questions, be open-minded about how you look at them, and then draw some conclusions. So with that in mind, we're going to jump in, and we're going to discover that in this part of Paul's letter, that despite his circumstances, he's got crazy joy, and he's going to contrast like ideas like this bucket, like I come up with my own meaning, with this other bucket that says like, no, my meaning is, it is stamped on me by a God who loves me and makes me and puts me here with an intended purpose. So he jumps in. And as he jumps in, he gives us these 2 paths. Discover and embrace why he made you. That's Paul's angle. The angle he contrasts himself with is create your own purpose from within. Okay, so how do each of these ideas play out when circumstances change? We're all familiar with changing circumstances, right? Probably happened to you today or yesterday. Certainly happened to us the last few years. But if you've lived a little bit, always happening to us. Here's Paul. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. So it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. So opening the letter, opening the conversation up, he starts with, I want you to know, listen, look at this line right here. What has happened to me? My circumstances have really served to advance the gospel. And Paul introduces us to the first idea when it comes to circumstances. A God-given reason for my life cannot be derailed by changing circumstances. Wouldn't it be incredible if you and I could live life in such a way that it could not be derailed by changing circumstances? And maybe I'd nod my head at that. I go, yeah. It's just fancy talk, right? Really, does it work that way? A God-given reason for my life cannot be derailed by changing circumstances. Paul starts his letter with that, compared to if I create my own reason for my life, it can be derailed by changing circumstances. Let me defend this a little bit. If I make something finite the ultimate, then circumstances, the winds of fate and change as they blow through life, those circumstances will determine my joy. Just think for a little bit. Has your joy been determined by circumstances as of late? You don't answer that out loud. Just think on that for a second. Has your joy been determined? Well, let's just go sports. Raise your hand if you thought you were going to be a great athlete when you grew up, when you got to be 20. If you were going to go on, raise your hand if you're in that bucket. Just 2 of us. Good. Got it. 4, 5. Okay, the honesty's starting to show up. Maybe some of you were that great athlete. Didn't happen for me. Okay, I'd like to blame circumstances. I got an injury, never quite recovered, became a Christian. That actually changed my life, and I focused on different things. But what's really interesting is you can make something finite like athletic accomplishment your ultimate, and it can be taken away with a CL, MCL, ACL, whatever one you want. It can be gone. Or let's say you make it, and then I'm a fan of boxing and UFC. There's nothing like watching a really, really old fighter, someone that's like 30, 31, a really old fighter in the ring, and you're like, oh, he should have retired like 5 years ago. Because the body can't sustain the level of greatness just to how it... So you could take sports, right? If you make a finite thing the ultimate, the circumstances of your life will determine your joy. They'll derail they'll derail the sense of purpose in your life. Or maybe you're not a sport. How about success? How many of you wanted like to own a company, good job, promotion, a decent 401k? Anybody in the room? Okay, so good. We're a good mix in here, all right? So here we go. So now we're in this bucket. Well, there's things called downturns, right? I mean, maybe you're like my 22-year-old who educated me all about crypto 6 months ago. It's so easy, Dad. You just buy it and it grows. 6 months ago, right? Things change. Now, of course, there's the idea of like the long position and stuff, but the bottom line is your success, your desire, your industry, maybe some of you went in an industry that no longer exists. You look at the top 50 growing jobs in the country, almost all of them you need math and coding skills for. I have 0 of those. I'm stuck here. I'm sorry, guys. This is what's going on, right? Success and money, if you make that your ultimate, a finite thing, circumstances, they'll rule you. But let's say you're very virtuous. It's sports and success and money and education. You're a people person. Oh, it's no more real than it is with people. If you make a relationship a finite thing, the ultimate thing in your life, you are guaranteeing yourself a lifetime of disappointment and frustration because no person is capable of satisfying the desires and needs of your heart. Look at Paul's language again. I want you to know, brothers, it's all about circumstances, that what has happened to me, my circumstances, has really served to advance the gospel. So what happened to Paul? Do you know what happened to Paul? You have to read the last part of Acts. That's the story where we learned about Lydia and the jailer in the beginning. I just have a little cheat sheet here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but what happened is a practical thing. Paul was on the move, like wind in his hair. I think he was bald, wind on his scalp. Excuse me. He was on the move. He was starting churches and telling people about Jesus, and he was fulfilling his created intent. And then a group of people rose up against him, and they lied about him, and they slandered him, and they accused him of some things. And he ended up getting dragged off the street. And when they dragged him off the street, they tried to kill him, and it actually says why they were trying to kill him. I don't know what those few words mean, but they're not good. Why they were trying to, have you ever been in the why they were trying to kill you part of life? It's not good, bad circumstances. Paul is in the why they were trying to kill him. Then they end up dragging him from the killing time, dragging him into prison, where over the next 4 to 6 years of his life, his circumstances get flipped on their head and go wild. Paul is put on the planet to travel around and tell people about Jesus. And it's all been taken away. That's his vocation, that's his job. It'd be like yours, gone, taken away. Not just taken away like it doesn't exist anymore, he can't do it. And he goes on, and over the course of these years, it tells us the story of his constant arrest. 3 trials. He sits before 3 historical Roman leaders, Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. All 3 put him on trial. All 3, they're like, dude, you're a Roman citizen. Just say that this stuff's not true. And instead, he's like, no, you should hear about Jesus. Every chance he gets with these people, circumstances don't change his God-given purpose. It gets so intense that with Agrippa, listen to what happens. Agrippa says to Paul, do you think in such a short time, this is a very influential historical Roman governor, do you think in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? I mean, Paul's on his game. And Paul goes, well, short time or long time, I pray to God that not only you, but every single person listening to me today would become what I am, someone who's been forgiven by Jesus and found my purpose in Jesus. And then he adds, but except for these chains. Well, none of that goes well, so Paul gets put on a boat with about 150 other criminals under Roman guard, and they're crossing the Mediterranean, and a storm comes up, and the whole ship's going to go down. They're like, throw the prisoners overboard. And God tells Paul, let them know no one's going to die. It's going to be nasty and gnarly. The ship's going to go down. No one's going to die. Paul says, guys, just keep our heads. God's going to make sure we all make it out alive. These are it's not like a Christian prison boat. It's prisoners and Roman soldiers. The ship goes down. They have no food. They're shipwrecked. They're adrift. No one dies. They end up on Malta. In spite of what's happened to me, they end up on Malta. Paul gets bit by a viper. It's nutty. Nothing happens to him. They think he's a god. They go nuts, right? Paul, when they're there, the soldiers go, we need to kill all these prisoners because if just one gets away, we're done. And then one of the soldiers goes, yeah, but remember Paul? Remember how he kind of like gave us hope and encouragement when things were at the very end? So they let all the prisoners live. And they end up making their way to Rome, where Paul gets put under house arrest, where he's most likely writing this letter from. He gets to live in with some relative freedom, but he's always right next to him, often chained to him, under Roman guard. There's a soldier. And you know what he was like with that soldier, right? I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me, so he's in chains, has really served to advance the gospel. Paul wakes up every morning, guys chained to him. He's like, this poor sucker. All day long, I'm going to give him my best sermon. I'm talking like all day. He's going to know the sermon himself, and he'll fill in the blanks for me. So Paul jumps in. He reveals in this story, and I mean, come on. So slander, hungry, trying to be killed, death, imprisonment. That's his circumstances. I would contend that's more intense than most of our circumstances. But they're still our circumstances. They still matter to us, right? And so in the midst of that, you see that this reality that if the reason for your life comes from God and his purposes for you, then circumstances can't derail it. And so many of us need to think deeply about this because we have been repeatedly derailed. We wake up and find ourselves in a place we didn't want to be, becoming a person we never wanted to become. And we've put our hope or our trust on something finite. We've made it the ultimate, and it just can't hold up. There's a lot of parents in this room. I love my 4 kids. They're not the ultimate thing. They're just my kids. And if I make them the ultimate, then my life is going to go. It's just going to go off the wrong rail some way because they don't belong to me. I'm not in charge of their destinies. They're free and they get to grow and become. And so it's every level of our lives, this is so important. If the reason for your life comes from God and his purposes for you, then circumstances can't derail it. To steal an old management quote and put all sorts of God talk on it, a God-given purpose will eat circumstances for breakfast. The worst thing that is happening right now is also the best thing that could happen. Could you imagine that being how you say things? The worst thing that's happening right now. This is not like positive thinking. This is not being subject to circumstances. You know that Life article I mentioned? There was an 11-year-old boy in it. I want to tell you what he can teach us. His name was Jason Gaze. Jason was diagnosed with cancer around the age of 6. He wrote his answer to the question, why am I here, at the age of 11. He lived till he was 40, till he died from cancer. And he lived out these words his entire life, starting when he was a little boy. He said, when I think about why I'm here, it's a really hard paper to write. I think God made each of us born for a different reason. If God gives you a great voice, maybe he wants you to sing. Or if God makes you 7 feet tall, maybe he wants you to play for the Lakers or Celtics. When my friend Kim died from cancer, I asked my mom if God was going to make Kim die when she was only 6. Why did he make her born at all? But my mom said, even though she was only 6, she changed people's lives. What that means is, like her brother or sister could be the scientist that discovers the cure for cancer, and they decided to do that because of Kim and like me too. Now, you could write this off as just a kid trying to make sense of pain and suffering, a kid trying to make sense of the world. But you know what? This kid never stopped believing this until he eventually lost his battle with cancer. He goes on to say, I used to wonder, why did God pick on me and give me cancer? Maybe it was because he wanted me to be a doctor who takes care of kids with cancer. So when they say, Dr. Jason, I get so scared. Or, you don't know how weird it is to be the only bald kid in your whole school. I can say, oh, yes, I do. I had cancer, and look at all my hair now. You come up with that sense of purpose. Your circumstances don't own you. They don't own you. When you become on board with that intent, you just can't lose. And we see that in his life. I think there's so many stories in this room. Now, we're not all perfect, right? So often we do this path and then we stop and we diverge and we start to think that our purpose comes from within, and we turn away from the idea that maybe God sees you, loves you, has a desire for his created intent is upon you. So let's jump to our second question then. These 2 buckets then, how do I handle the success of others? We're in a relentlessly competitive environment from the day we're born to the day you're at today. Relentlessly competitive, all about success. So how do I handle the success of others. Well, if I create my own purpose, I run the risk that if other people are successful in my thing, they steal my joy. I don't want somebody growing the business I'm designed to grow. I don't want somebody moving in on my territory, somebody taking my starting spot. And if I make the finite the ultimate, I'm constantly looking at everyone who has done the same thing, and I'm putting a measuring stick up. So if you're like the funny guy in your group, right? You're the funny one. Everyone laughs at you all the time till the new person moves into the group and they're the funny one. And you want to take them out, like just at the knees. But you want to take them out because like, I'm the funny one. I can't enjoy that. Okay, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's this. I think we've all been either subject or this has been our game. We have intentionally sabotaged people's success. We've intentionally sabotaged their success because we see in them they have what we have, but maybe they're better. And maybe you're like, no way. But also, we've been on the receiving end of that. Started early. It's the most painful when it happens among siblings, I think. Happens in family, where we find ourselves trying to work this out, and it comes with us into adulthood. How do we handle the success of others? And so we see somebody coming in, they come to the table with our passion, similar gifts, similar purpose from within, and now we're caught in this comparative challenge. And we can't celebrate for them. And if you find a thing that gives you meaning when others succeed in it, it will rob you of your joy. Paul somehow has joy. 16 times he talks about it in this letter. It's actually not known as a focus of love. It's a focus of joy. But those two are so tied together. So listen to Paul talking about this competitive idea. Most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. So he's like, my home team's winning. This is great. We have common cause, common community. Then he goes on to say this. It's not going to be on the screen. Just hear these words. He goes, so some preach Jesus from envy and rivalry, and others do it from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, verse 16, knowing that I'm put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition. Did you know that could exist? Like, church-type people could do things out of selfish ambition that are supposed to be good? Not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me even more. Now, Paul says something really interesting in the words I just read to you. He says, I've been put here. It's one of the few times he uses military language. It simply means like my commanding officer stationed me here. It's not up to me. I'm in prison because my commanding officer put me in prison. And these people that are trying to make a mockery of me or trying to insult me or using me for their own gain, doesn't matter. My commanding officer put me here. I was put here. And he goes on to say, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice. Paul's context is overtly spiritual and religious. His actions translate to any environment. His sense of hands-off, like, I am not in a competitive race to be the best preacher anyone ever knows. That's not my thing. I'm just made in the image of God for the intent of God. And I'll have my greatest satisfaction when I live into that purpose. And so when it comes to competition, these two buckets, know and love God, or knowing and meaning comes from within us. If my purpose is to know him and make him known, then I celebrate when someone finds success. In the social media world, it's a really interesting measuring stick because it's designed to play our competitiveness against each other. We celebrate when we see someone else, another parent whose kids are thriving and they're at the park every day, and how do they do it? Or do we go, man, I'm the worst parent ever? Or when you see somebody posting their latest workout video and they're now deadlifting 375, and you're like, oh, they must be using something. There's no way that's all natty. If my purpose is to know him and make him known, then I celebrate when someone finds success. If I control my own purpose, then the success of others runs the risk of stealing my joy, because a finite thing can't hold the weight of our desires. That's something I'd really like us all to think about. Can a finite thing really hold all the weight and the tremendous potential and beauty of your heart and the longing you have within you? And I don't mean to be a downer, but I really think it can. Like I said, athletics, job, career, education, hobby, art, talent, creativity, relationships. Imagine if you went into a relationship with this idea. I saw you across the room and just all my longings and desires will be forever satisfied in you. If that's how the relationship starts, run. What? All your longings and desires will be forever satisfied in me? Get ready for a life of disappointment. It's a challenge when we think about it. And you know, so many successful people have climbed to the very top. And at the top, they've said things like, when I got up here, I discovered that there wasn't anything here. I thought there would be, but there wasn't. And that brings us to the third question. So, how do I handle changing circumstances? What do I do about the competitive nature of the world? And the last one's a little trickier, but how do I live morally? When I have these two ways of thinking about life, that I'm here intended to know God and make him known, or my sense of knowing comes within myself. We're not going to actually talk about morality properly. We're just going to talk about what it looks like for you and I, for people to live out and how it affects other people. Listen to Paul's words. He says, in this I rejoice, that the gospel's being preached, that my purpose for life is happening and other people are doing it for the wrong reasons. I don't care. I rejoice. Yes, and I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. For me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. I've never really known anybody that says, oh, I want to live so badly because I have so much life ahead of me. Oh, I don't care if I'm done living because I can't wait to be fully complete with Jesus. I'm fully over here. Like, I like life. I'm not that interested in death. I love life. It's this one where I get caught up. Paul somehow just bounces between the two. For me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Whether I live or die doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my purpose. It doesn't change who I am. Now that's tricky because death is the one that gets all of us, challenges all of us, confronts all of us. He goes, if I'm to go on living in the body, this will mean more fruitful labor for me. I get to keep doing what I love. Yeah, what should I choose? I don't know. I'm torn between the two. He is like legit crazy about this. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far, but it's more necessary for you that I remain. So here's his tension. I want to be with Jesus. There's this thing called resurrection, and I'm ready for it. It's been a hard few years, and my body's tired. I'm tired of almost being killed. I'm ready to be with Jesus, but you know what? I love you, and I don't want to be done with you. I'm going to stay right here, and I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. Life, death, freedom, captivity. Here's why I said this is a morality question. Because most of the injustice that comes out of the human experience comes from a fear, we're going to stretch it all the way to the end, a fear of death. Someone else, it runs a risk to our livelihood. Therefore, we bring oppression, or they have something that will increase our livelihood. And therefore, we act unjustly. And so much of the mistreatment, the hate, the harm that comes out of the world, it comes from this idea that maybe we won't have what we need to be fully happy. No one says it that way, but just think about that. So it really is a morality thing. Paul is like a virtuous moral person because he's able to go, I've got no qualms with death, so I don't need to take anything from you. I don't need to inflict anything on you. I don't need to, in my last moments, when the jailer turns away, I don't need to crack him over the head and then ice pick him in the kidney and then run and pick the lock and run. I don't need to do that because I'm fine either way. I'm torn between these two. There's something we say, following Jesus will make your life better and make you better at life. It comes from a church in Atlanta, but whenever I say it, I feel like it's the most cheesy, flat statement ever. Except this is what Paul has discovered. He's like, this is just the good stuff. Kill me, imprison me, slander me, put me in jail, take away my chance to do the thing I love doing the most. It don't matter. It's not a thing to me because my purpose doesn't come from those things. Wherever I am, however I'm capable, whatever it is, whatever breath I have, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to love God. I'm going to love people. If we're created by God to fulfill his intended purpose for us, then there is a universal morality. The way we love and forgive and care for and strive for not only our friends but for our enemies changes. And I just think this is more of a philosophical statement. But if there's no God and there's no meaning outside of ourselves, then there's no universal morality. This was always my challenge in my early days of exploring Jesus was come on, you can't tell me something's right or wrong just because you think it is. It's a real challenge. We adopt this way of thinking. And Paul challenges us to go, but your joy is going to be circumstance. Because what if your neighbor, the person who moves in across the street, has a very different idea of what's right or wrong than you? There goes your joy. There goes your joy. So we're going to end with this. Right now, your head's probably like, what is going on? Paul figured out the secret to life. He figured it out. This morality question is really interesting. We are going to look at Bertrand Russell, who is a great thinker, who posited there's no God. And the more we embrace that, the better we can live. And we're going to compare him to another great thinker. So Bertrand Russell ended a thought with this. He said, his origin, his growth, he's talking about you and me, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are all but the outcome of an accidental collocation of atoms. Just chemistry, biology, governed by physics. That's all. Stop thinking you have a greater purpose. He goes on to say all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius, these things all die. They go extinct. Because the only reason we are here is because of a random collocation of atoms. Some stuff just came together in 2022 in Southeast Boise. Bertrand Russell is not an evil person. He was certainly not an unintelligent person. He was trying to answer the question, why are we here? Let's compare him with another great thinker. Might as well see this. There's no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and action that can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. Jesus was asked, Jesus, what's the mega life? That was the word used, mega. What's the biggest? Tell us, how do we know we're here for the right reasons? He said, look, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor. So Paul grabbed hold of this idea. My created intent is to love God and love others. That's my created intent. That's why I'm here. I will have the greatest purpose and I will experience the most satisfaction when I leverage my life towards this outcome. And then his circumstances started to change and things got crazy. And you realize something. I'm going to end with this. You realize I'm not a huge chess fan. I wish I was better. I'm really bad. But there's a few people who are good. And Paul actually figured out how to put life in checkmate. Now, any chess fans in the room? Come on, be proud. Yes. A couple of you. I'm about to make a little bit of fun of you. So Garry Kasparov, we all know, maybe. Garry Kasparov is probably the most famous chess name. And once he had a chess match with a computer. Is a big deal. It's a long time ago, okay? He's older now, but he's a grandmaster and he's a big deal. Well, he had a rematch with Magnus Carlsen, kind of a young gun. These two are referred to as the LeBron James and the Michael Jordan of chess. What I love about that is you've never heard an announcer be like, this is the Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen of the NBA. You don't ever see that unfold, right? So they played, this is just a screenshot. It was on Zoom. It was in 2020. It's weird. There was a lot of trash that got talked in here by the commentators. It was a fascinating thing. None of this is important except this. The whole goal of chess is to put someone in checkmate. Checkmate. The whole purpose behind it. So it's checkmate. It's when you get positioned in such a way that no matter what move your opponent makes, you can't lose. Checkmate. They go right, checkmate. Left, checkmate. Forward, checkmate. Back, checkmate. It doesn't matter. Whatever move. And Paul figured out how to put life in checkmate. He figured out how to answer Life Magazine's question, why are we here? He's like, I've got it. Circumstances, doesn't matter. Whatever move you throw at me, imprison me, great. I'll tell the people in prison about Jesus. Fine, kill them, great. I get to be with Jesus. Fine, let them live, great. I get to hang out with people I love. They just could every move they tried to make against Paul till his eventual death. He had the world in checkmate. For me to live as Christ and to die as gain. Wouldn't it be beautiful to wake up tomorrow and know that whatever life threw at you, you could say, that's okay, because my greatest satisfaction, my highest purpose is going to come from me living into my created intent, which is to know and love God. So I want to ask you a question. How would your life answer the question, why am I here? How would your life, think about your actual practical life. How would it answer the question? Paul said it this way, for me to live as Christ, to die as gain. If I'm going to go on living in the body, great. What do I choose? I don't know. I'm torn between the two. I want to depart and be with Jesus, but I know that's better, but I also want to be with you because I love you and we have so much to do. Convinced of this, I hope I'll remain. He didn't end up remaining. He ended up being executed by the Roman authorities. But you know, up to that moment, he was like, great, I got the world in checkmate. So how would your life answer this question? And we're going to sing a closing song and head out into our Sunday.